This is the continued story of the book I Saw God's Hand by E.L. Martin, as retold to the children of the Watertown SDA Church Primary Sabbath School. I'm your storyteller, Austin Bacchus. Let's go.
Chapter 11, The Boat We Couldn't Get Home. On a number of occasions, I had expressed a desire to have an additional boat for my work. The 40-footer boat I already had was a wonderful improvement over traveling by canoe, as I had done in the first years of my mission experience in the Vailala district. The way had been hard at Vailala because the only means of transport was by foot patrol for inland work or by canoe for coastal or river work. Those treks used to take me away for up to 8 weeks at a time, and often while traveling by canoe, I and my companions would be caught in a heavy tropical downpour that soaked all of our supplies and bedding. Maybe it seemed like lack of appreciation to ask for a second boat. We had been thrilled when a used 40-footer was purchased for our field. This meant I could travel faster, cover greater areas, and have extra time with my family. This boat proved a tremendous blessing, but it always worried me, for it was very deep drafted, and it was a potential danger in crossing river bars. It wouldn't stand up if it happened to run aground in a running out tide. After some 2 years of bringing forward my request to the mission board, I was truly grateful when from another of our mission stations close to Port Moresby, a so-called whale boat fitted with a new inboard motor was voted to my field. It was just an open 14-foot boat, but it was ideal for my requirements. The problem was getting it to my field, for hauling it on the 40-footer would cause us to be too top-heavy for the rough seas that were now running. The only alternative we could come up with was to tow it behind the larger boat for the 150 miles from Port Moresby to Vailala. I purchased 300 feet of new 3-inch rope for the purpose, but we still had to wait several days because the seas were very angry. On Thursday afternoon, there seemed to be definite signs of a break in the weather. I informed the crew we'd be on our way at dawn the next morning, and our plans were now to spend a quiet Sabbath in protected waters off the coast of Yule Island, and at 10 o'clock Saturday night, we would sail for Vailala. The plan would give us ample time to reach the Vailala river mouth before the top of the high tide. Late on Saturday afternoon, a rather large coastal boat, skippered by Captain Dave Lamont, probably the best skipper ever in those treacherous Papuan waters, dropped anchor close by. I called over to him, inquiring, "How are the seas outside of the reef?" He answered in one word, "Shocking!" He asked what time I was putting out. I told him 10 p.m. He replied, "Oh, you should be okay, Elwin. The seas have eased a little in the past couple hours. The weather report's encouraging. By 10 o'clock tonight, you should be all right." We closed the Sabbath, and during the remaining daylight, we made our way through a very difficult reef passage where one has to alter course every few minutes to avoid all the hidden sunken obstacles. We dropped anchor at about 7 p.m. at a point from which I knew that I could run out through the remainder of the reef just following one straight line on the compass heading, even though the passage was not very wide. The night, which proved to be black as pitch, did not worry us too much as we would be running by compass all night. Shortly before 10 p.m., we pulled up the anchor and bore out into the night at full speed through the passage. We were no sooner clear of the reef than we found we were in shocking seas with no way back, for there were no light beacons on the whole coastline except at Port Moresby. I decided the only thing to do was to go on, even though I couldn't see how the boat could weather the seas. I put straight out to sea for the first hour and a half, almost at right angles to the coastline so as to be clear of reefs. It was almost impossible to maintain the course. The seas were crashing over the decks. We had been running for about an hour when one of the crew members said, "Master, the whaleboat's gone." I couldn't believe it, but when we pulled in the tow line, we found it had snapped like a piece of string. It's extremely dangerous to turn around in heavy seas, but I felt I had to locate the new boat that we were towing home. With the aid of a powerful searchlight, we did sight the whaleboat after about an hour of searching. I knew it couldn't sink, for it had large watertight tanks under the seats. As we neared the whaleboat, one of my boys plunged over into that raging sea and was soon lost sight of. When he says my boys, he's referring to one of the natives, not one of his own children. I shouted to the boy, who was looking frantically for his mate with a searchlight, to hold the light on the whaleboat. "Don't take it off the whaleboat." Within a few minutes, we saw a bobbing head come up near the whaleboat. And as we watched, we saw the boy climb onto the whaleboat. Somehow the boys got a rope over to him. I couldn't leave the wheel to watch, but the others said that he crawled back along the rope to safety. And thus we had the whaleboat in tow again. So not knowing where we were was disquieting, to say the least. We could have been 10 miles up the coast, 10 miles down the coast, or, what was even more frightening, we might already be near the reef. We had no way of knowing. We couldn't see a foot in front of us without the searchlight. I decided to put out to sea for another hour and a half to avoid running into any hidden reefs. We'd been running the best part of an hour, the seas getting worse every minute, when one of the boys shouted to me. What do you think he said? "Master, the whaleboat's gone again!" And sure enough, once again, the 3-inch rope had broken like a thread of cotton. Again, I turned around in the raging seas, and after about half an hour of searching with the searchlight, we found the whaleboat. This time I ordered my boys to run the anchor chain out. We had 360 feet of chain, almost as thick as my little finger. Somewhat confidently, I told the boys no sea would break that. We went again through the same difficult and dangerous procedure as before, but at last we had the whaleboat in tow again. Now I was in a bigger turmoil than ever. Maybe this time we were 20 miles up the coast, or 20 miles down the coast, or perhaps we were nearer to the reef. Not knowing, I decided to put out to sea for another hour and a half. We'd been running only about half an hour when the boys shouted, "What do you think?"
The whaleboat's gone again.
"Master, the whaleboat's gone!" I couldn't believe it. When we pulled the chain in, we found that the chain had torn out the nose of the boat, and it was still attached to the chain. Turning in the sea for the third time, I decided that if we could find the whaleboat, I would just try to get the new engine out of it, even if that meant losing the boat. It would mean undoing about a dozen bolts, tying a rope around the engine, and hauling it on board. I asked my most capable boy, the one who had plunged in the sea on the 2 previous occasions, to take the wheel and try to hold the boat into the sea. I told the light boy to keep the light on the whaleboat, and I'd do the rest. Picking up 2 crescent wrenches, I was about to plunge in the sea when 3 of the crewmen clung to me, and with tears running down their faces said, "Master, you can't go. If one of us is lost, that doesn't matter, but if you're lost, then we're all lost, for we don't know where we are." I knew they needed me, but I also knew they would not know which bolts to undo. So there was only one alternative. We would just have to leave the whaleboat. It was already awash with water, with only the watertight tanks holding it in a half-submerged condition. This was an agonizing decision. Although I felt that our boat couldn't possibly weather the seas much longer, I decided to put out to sea again. Not having the slightest clue where we were, I set a course that I believed would be straight out to sea. With the second in command at the wheel, I went down to my cabin and poured out my heart to the master of the seas, telling him I knew he could rebuke the wind and sea as he had when with his disciples on the Sea of Galilee, he spoke those words, "Peace, be still." I told him we were lost in heavy seas. An impression swept over me to alter our course to the compass heading 090, which is due east. Now this seemed completely wrong to me, but I hurried to the wheelhouse, set the course, and told the boy not to alter course again unless I told him to do so. Then going on deck, I posted a boy to watch for any sign of a village firelight. He replied, "Master, you would never see anything on a night like this." I asked him to listen for any sound of waves breaking on the reef. Again he replied, "You would never hear anything on a night like this." The only way he was able to prevent his being washed overboard was to lash himself to the mast with what was left of the whaleboat's tow line. Returning to the wheel, I took over again, but every 15 or 20 minutes I'd have a boy take over for a few minutes while I went on deck to ask whether there was any sign of a fire or sound of a reef, and every time I was told the same words, "Master, you couldn't see or hear anything on a night like this." Some little time later, I was suddenly impressed to make a major change in my course. I did that immediately. Again and again I went on deck to ask whether anything could be seen or heard above the crashing seas. At last the boy said, "Master, the seas seem to be calming a little." And then in a matter of moments we were in calm waters. We throttled the engine right back and prayed. Shortly daylight broke, and can you believe it, we were safely inside the reef that we had gone out through at 10 o'clock the night before. We were well inside the place where we had anchored. We ran up alongside Dave Lamont's boat, and he called out, "Hey, Padre, I thought you were going out at 10 o'clock last night." I told him that I had, but he flatly refused to believe me. He said, "No, man, no one, regardless of what kind of skipper he is, could put out to sea at that time last night in the pitch blackness and find his way back in through the reef and be next to my boat here before sunrise." I guess even today, I'd have a little difficulty in piloting a boat in through that reef in daylight, and in doing so, I would have had to alter my course 20 times. Yet my captain knows of a passage where our boat came in on just 2 compass headings. Some days later, when seas had calmed, we made a thorough search of the coastline, inquiring at almost every village for any wreckage of the whaleboat, but it was never seen again.
Be sure to tune in next time for more stories from the book I Saw God's Hand by E.L. Martin. And meanwhile, feel free to check out these videos as well as others on my YouTube channel with many more mission and Bible stories for kids and adults. God bless you.